too, and I know a lot of you guys don't do this, so you can just see that it's the same, the top part is the same as the sewage. I added private water system construction date. I think that's kind of important. Also the length of casing, if we do have records or if for some reason you've gotten into the actual well, you can write down the length of casing. Electrical conduit, sealed or not sealed, I got that from Summit County. I think that's kind of important. That's something that needs to be looked at that we didn't have before. And property line, additional water source available. That's something that our director wanted in there. If there's a dug well that's used for watering plants, we want to know that. Mark it on the form, or mark it on your drawing and put on there what's going on if there's a cistern or more than one water well for some reason on the property. That's all the same. That's all the same, except we have a certificate of review. Certificate of review looks a lot like the sewage one. If you can mark more than one there. I mean, if it's vacant, but everything seems fine, mark compliant and vacant, just so you know, you don't have to choose. And the same. So those are the new forms. We're going to get them on the internet and use them. Enjoy. Do you want to do this?
Laura touched on earlier with the boxes that we check as far as unsatisfactory or unacceptable or maybe recommendations. I want to bring us back to where this department needs to kind of keep its focus, because we sometimes get off track and start running down all these T's and boxes, and they are important. Please don't get me wrong, they're important. But our main objective in the law is what's kind of spelled out here as far as us saying it's failed or it's unacceptable. And there is in the law a public health nuisance definition for sewage. So basically what we're trying to watch for is, does this meet the threshold of a public health nuisance? And at that point, it'll get marked. Otherwise, a lot of what we'll do is just say needs further review or something like that, or needs T's or risers added. So if you just take a look down through here, number one there, I don't know how well you can read it, is not operating properly due to a missing component, incorrect settings, or electrical and mechanical failure. So aerators that aren't on, bingo, that's an easy one. This one's a little more kind of vague. There is a blockage in a known sewage treatment system component or pipe that causes backup of sewage or effluent, affecting the treatment process or inhibiting plumbing drainage. So it backs up, there's a pipe with roots clogged into it, or maybe there's cast after the tank gets plugged. Those types of things can be reported because it's going to cause a backup or it's going to cause improper treatment. There's other things that might fall into this category that you might think, I'm not sure about. Number three, that's basically, I'm trying to make sure that's the one I'm thinking of. Okay, so this is the easy one. It's bleeding on the surface of the ground. That's the easy one. And then under that, presence of dye because it's bleeding on the surface of the ground. So those are the things that we're directed by law to make sure are dealt with. Other things of a more minor nature, we want to handle a little more carefully, because we're not trying to ding people. We're just trying to make sure that the public health nuisance doesn't exist. We want to also touch on what we're doing. This is a little off the property transfer. This might be a little more along the service providers that deal with aeration especially. I wanted to kind of give you an update of what we're doing on this front. Lately, the money at the state level has been completely reorganized. A lot of the local health departments have lost a lot of funding, and one of which is the smoking. There was a smoking law put into effect. There was money available to deal with that at the local level. Well, as far as we know right now, I think they're trying to hold on to a little bit of something, but as far as we know right now, those funds are either going to go away or they're going to be minimized. So what happens is we have an individual standing back behind the camera right here who was dealing in that program, who now we have additional manpower available to try to really do some of the things that we've always wanted to do in the operation and maintenance program. And really, the first phase of this is what I mentioned earlier, and that's the aerobic treatment systems and drip systems that are higher maintenance that need to be maintained. And many of you that do that work are supplying us with service contracts, service records. That's great. That is being databased, but we don't have the logistics in place to really try to get that cycle going where if they fail to maintain the contract, we get on them and make sure they get back on the contract. There's a lot of databasing that needs to be done. Courtney has been, I've kind of given her some guidelines. I says, okay, now try to figure out how to deal with this. And the biggest issue we keep stumbling with is the databasing part of it. It's just a huge undertaking. But she has been working with that, is to try to get the database developed so we can coordinate, organize, information that goes out of here and information that comes in here. Now there's a question mark after this next one. We would love, I don't know what you would love, but we would love to see web-based data entry, because that means you don't have to send stuff to us. It just goes into the web, and a lot of it that's available out there is real time. You enter the stuff in, we get it, we know exactly when someone's failed to keep a contract, and we can get on top of that quickly. So we're exploring web-based data entry. There's a company that we've met with that does this, that is a nominal fee to every time a record gets entered in there by the service provider. Those types of things, we don't have to organize it. It's all done on their server. We have access, you have access. It also, just an aside note, that software also gives the service provider a bunch of tools. Receiving, invoicing, reminders, keeping your own database in order. So it's kind of a neat tool that they've developed, and the fee is associated with each report that you put in. So we're looking at those types of things. I can't tell you and sit here today tell you exactly where we're going to go, because we have to consider a lot of things. But we are trying to bolster that program. There will probably be a fee associated with each contract that you submit to us, because our side of it is, if you're maintaining the contract and collecting the additional fee, we can then provide the enforcement it takes to keep the people on the contract. So I have to have manpower, I've got to have money to do that. And so it helps you because you get more customers, and it helps us because we get what needs to really be done, and that's good O&M. Since 2007, this is where our struggle has been. Since 2007, when the law changed, the NPDES permits and the EPA sampling, and all that came into effect, we've been chasing our tails, trying to make sure people were sampling their systems, trying to comply with the EPA protocols. At the same time, all the old aerators are getting touched. It seems stupid to me. So you got all these old ones are having problems, and the new ones we're running around sampling because that's all the manpower we have. And it's just been kind of strange, so we really are trying to build it in the direction it needs to go. But that's being worked on right now. We're also trying to decide what we're going to do with sampling. Don't know the answer to that right now. At a minimum, it's probably going to be notices going out. There may be more where we might actually take the sample when they fail to take the sample and then assess it to them. I don't know. But all that is being looked at right now. Courtney is the person that's on it, so I'm sure there's going to be some soliciting of your input on those issues, because we do want your input. Other thing that we have is the property transfer program. I do have basically one full-time employee, and that's Laura, who works in that program. And at first, when we first did this, I didn't realize the scope of how large this thing was. When Nick started doing it, I had envisioned, you all remember Nick, and he's since moved on elsewhere, and then Laura took over for him. I envisioned him doing that and some other O&M stuff, which Courtney's going to be working on. It was way huger than what I had thought it was going to be. So I have basically one full-time employee doing that program, and you all know how it is. Banks, realtors, they want you to write a letter for everything. It gets very cumbersome, and then they want us to look at the water stuff, which isn't even required. All we ask you to submit to us is the sewage stuff. The water stuff is just made available to you as a courtesy. So we are spending a lot of time in that program that we would like to recover some of our costs for. So there may be, similar to other counties around here, like Summit County, a fee associated with a report submittal because of all the review time that gets invested in that. Along with that too is the fact that we do recheck certain amount of everybody's systems that they evaluate. Some may ask, why do you do that? Well, I think it's only fair that we make sure that everybody's playing on the same field. You know, there are concerns out there that some individuals may pass systems a little easier than the next guy. We don't want that to happen. We want to make sure everybody's playing by the same set of rules, and nobody gets a little more work because they're a little more loosey-goosey with their writing. So that's what that's about, to make sure everybody's playing on the same field. And I think that's only fair. That we do that. And then we also offer additional consultation. You're not sure, try to help you out. You put needs further evaluation, try to help you out and try to make sure that gets taken care of. We did probably the smallest percentage of all of this department. Of the 300, what was it, 40, 50?
Yeah.
Maybe a sixth of all the ones that go through were done by us. Last thing I mentioned earlier, the sewage treatment system rules look like they're going to be adjusted here shortly, so we'll see how that goes. We're also trying to, in the same breath of all the stuff I just told you that we're working on with the O&M and all that, we are still trying to be sure that when the code comes out, we're not going to do something that conflicts with the code. So we got to watch all that at the same time. We don't want to go too fast because we might do something entirely different than what the state's thinking. Oh, and then the next, you want to go to this here. Okay. We wanted to talk about water intrusion. I'm going to ask Laura to chime in because she did this section here. But we'll try to give some examples of some of the problems that we've seen. Now we're kind of coming back to the installer side, but service providers certainly should be aware of the fact that this problem exists. So where are the areas where water intrusion is a problem? Number one, leaky fixtures. Everybody knows about that. So individuals need to make sure that their toilets aren't running all the time, their sinks aren't dripping. This is elusive. If anybody's dealt with this problem before, so you go do a property transfer, you're an installer going to replace a system, and you go out to the property, and the first thing you notice, there's no foot or something. Then you notice maybe it can flow to somewhere by gravity, or maybe it can't. So you notice, what am I supposed to do with this? No footer sump. I know very likely they have footer drain or footer tiles around this system. Where do they go, and is it possible it's getting into the system? One thing that we have seen, and I know there's a whole different varieties of this, is right here at the foundation where the pipe from the sewer passes through the wall, clay tile, and so is the footer, and they interact. And the footer drain may be doing its job, but there's a crack in the clay tile and it just drops it right down into the sewer line and goes out in the septic tank. That's hard to figure out. And basically, the only way I know to do it sometimes when you encounter this problem is cammering the line. How else are you going to know what's going on down there? But that can happen, and that can really drive you crazy. You can put a brand new system in and watch it fail when that happens. And I said earlier, the biggest cause of early system failure is water, more than it is anything else, soils or installation. So we want to be cautious. That may dictate to you, maybe I need to replace that sewer line right up to the house instead of just cutting it where the old sewer line entered the tank. Things like that need to be considered.